You're listening to Kayak Flyer with your host, Sean. Tonight, we're brought to you by Tennessee Trailers, OutdoorAdventureTrailers.com. Simply the best way to get your kayak to and from the water. Bajuco Flats Fly Co. Simply the best custom-made fly rods on the market, always built to order just the way you want it. Find Bajuco Flats Fly Co. on Instagram and Facebook. StoneflyNets.com, made 100% in the great state of Arkansas with your choice of woods or burls. Stonefly nets can even be customized for that favorite fisher person in your life. Check out StoneflyNets.com for details. CutthroatFurledLeaders.com, the only leaders that I fish with. Cutthroat Furled Leaders are excellent for saltwater, freshwater, trout, bass, you name it, you can catch it with a Cutthroat Furled Leader. Head to CutthroatFurledLeaders.com, promo code KAYAK to save 15%. Do not adjust your dial. Do not reload if you're watching on YouTube. Yes, indeed, Adam is with us. I know we got him, thanks to the crowdfunding, we got him bailed out of county, which is evidently where he's been for the last 4 months. Adam, dude, where have you been?
Yeah, no kidding. And hey, buddy, it's so good to be back on. It's been a wild summer, I'll tell you that, man. Between traveling and stuff with the kids and family life and work and whatnot, it's just been so hard to make the time, candidly, for doing this awesome podcast. So I've missed you guys. It's good to be back. It's good to see you, Sean. I'm liking the new digs. You've got the new background for those that have the cameras on. So I'm excited to hear about that. I'm really thrilled. And then just the frame here to see that your fire extinguisher is there, and I'm hoping it's ready to roll for when you get too crazy with the fly tying. You're a man prepared.
Yes, I'm a man prepared because just out of the shot is an indoor barbecue grill. So that's the fire extinguisher is there, and when I light things on fire, occasionally we have to light things on fire when fly tying.
True.
I'm hard pressed to think now what they are, but I know I've had to do it before. Oh, especially when you're making eyes.
Yeah.
When you're making eyes
Yeah.
for the shrimp and the crawfish,
Absolutely.
you've got to have fire.
Or if you want the truly effective, if you want the truly effective San Juan worm, you've got to burn the
yes.
Man.
Yeah, you got to burn the end. So I've got my lighter here, and I've got my fire extinguisher within reach. I've got my painting by a family friend who was a relatively famous artist in the 70s, known for watercolors and covered bridges. I've got my Gas Monkey garage, the Midas Corvette over here, and then I've got this small bass that has a very fun story behind it, and of course my college alumni clock set to my favorite time.
I love it. That's great, man. I'm hanging out literally in the closet off my bedroom. So yours is a much more intricate and detailed backdrop than mine. So props to you, buddy.
Yep. We had to do some trade-offs. The other studio, I never did like the way the gray background looked in the other studio, and frankly, I needed more space. Last week's episode, Kyle Ludwig was on, and he has been talking with me, and we have started something new that you're more than welcome to be on whenever you'd like to join us. It's drinking on the fly.
Nice.
And so what we're going to do, I had to move back to my fly table. So if you watch the fly videos, you'll recognize this background, but we have to have, we're going to do the half hour YouTube show. We're trying to keep it to a half hour where we're going to talk about whatever it is we're drinking. And then we're going to tie a fly. And I haven't decided yet if we're going to cut in and edit the fly up close, or if we're just going to talk about it from a further perspective and then put that video with the step-by-step how-to without the banter
Cool
on. So we're looking at those two options. We're going to try it two different ways and see how it goes. But Kyle has been gracious enough to be on the show before, and he really wanted to do something. And we said, why don't we do this? And then we can invite folks on. And your name obviously came up as a wonderful fly tyer that we know. Rick from Oasis Benches is going to critique us one day. So, Greg, Gretchen and Al Beatty are going to hopefully be on a little bit to watch us try and tie some of their flies. So there should be plenty of hilarity over on that other show. And then we're also going to cross post So if you're on the Kayak Flyer YouTube, hopefully we'll be cross posting enough that things will be available.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome.
but what's funny is you say you go on these trips with your family. Every Tuesday after you missed a show, I saw you posting pictures of trout.
That's true. Yeah. So they've not all been family trips, but some of them I go trout fishing with the family, but they get left at the campsite and I'll sneak out early and I'll head up to the park and I'll try to get some trout fishing in before I feel like I'm beckoned back to be with the family. So there's a little bit of there's some family and also some friend time in there, you bet.
I was sitting in American Lit the other day, and I look my phone vibrates, and the kids are working on something. I look at it, and it's pictures of you catching trout.
Yeah. Honestly, this year I've done this is probably the least amount of trout fishing I've done in 3 or 4 summers. Um, I got my kayak over the winter last year, so I have been, and I was a focus of mine at the beginning of this calendar year. I wanted to be out on more local, easier waters to get to in 10, 15 minutes. Didn't have to be this big skip out of work Friday, get there late, just have Saturday, come home Sunday. Because if I'm going to go trout fishing, I'm 3 hours from the closest trout stream. So it's more of a commitment to do that, which is what I prefer. But man, I've really enjoyed getting to understand kayak fishing, which is all brand new to me. But I'm doing it on mostly still water, so local ponds and lakes. It's mostly bass fishing, traditional setup, bait caster, and spin rod and reel. But it's been great. It's kind of it's reunited me with what I used to fish for the majority of my life until fly fishing. But um, to be out on the water, and you know this better than anybody else, there's something different
Mhm.
about being out in the water, in the kayak and fishing, as opposed to wading in a stream or wet wading or fishing from the bank. So that's what I've done a ton this year. I've caught some really good bass, caught some wipers, things that I just don't typically go for, and I've had a great time. So I've trout fishing just a couple times this year when normally I probably get down there 5 or 6 times throughout the summer.
Yeah, I've had that exact same experience. It seemed like every one of my fishing buddies, it's like all of a sudden we had all this stuff come up. One of my friends, his father passed away.
Mm,
So keep him in your thoughts, guys. And so he was going back and forth to where he grew up with his mom. And so he was out. Another one of my friends, he has his daughter some weekends. And so it seemed like every time I had a family thing going was his free weekend,
yeah.
and so I didn't hit a lot of rivers this year. I love river fishing. I love fly fishing off my kayak in a river. But what I did have was an abundance of time just to drive the 15 minutes out to the Elks Lodge,
Okay.
and we've got a 60-acre lake out there. And so I went back into something that I never really did. I would fish from a lake from the bank here or there as a kid, but I grew up on these Ozark Rivers. That's where my dad preferred to go. He liked to swim and he liked to swim in clean water, and we never went to a lake. Excuse me. So, on the 10th of June, I contacted Wilderness Systems about my kayak having a crack in it. Um, you could float it. You had to dump water out of it because it did take some in. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. But I finally got it on the 27th of August, I think is when it finally came in.
Oh my gosh.
So roughly 2 months and 17 days later, but they did send me the exact same color. It was missing a few nuts and bolts on the seat, but I'm not going to complain. I just ran out to the hardware store and got some stainless steel and put that together.
Yeah.
And I'm getting ready to put it back out on the lake. And I tell you, the one thing that I've been really, really thinking about, if everything's going to hold true and I'm going to stay in the teacher business, we have so many Great Lakes around this part of the area. And when you get down south and east where the Delta flood area is for the river,
Hmm.
you get lakes in there, and there's not a lot of running water, at least not clean running water. And so I've really been debating on buying a depth finder, fish finder, to be able to locate structure and things like that, especially with a fly rod with a sinking leader or a heavier fly. I've just really been thinking about that a lot. We all sort of turn different directions as we fish. I fished a lot of my St. Croix rods this summer, a lot of spinning gear, but I fished a lot of fly fishing for topwater, especially later on in the year. In the past couple, say 2 months, I've done a lot of the Fly Tires Dungeon Hoppers,
Okay.
um, or not the Fly Tires Dungeon, sorry, the River Road Creation Hoppers.
Okay. Sure.
My trout I've been making buggers out of the MS bugger dubbing from Fly Tires Dungeon. That's what I've been catching trout on. They sort of look in between a pellet and a bugger.
Yeah.
So I tie them on a little short shanked hook, just spin a dubbing loop, wrap it up, and tie it off with a bead. And man, I've been down at the Spring River in Arkansas when I've gone. That's what I've used and been really
Oh,
successful with.
that's cool.
So it's been a really learning year.
Yeah, no, for sure. I echo that. So my kayak it's huge. It's a 12.5 foot ascend kayak.
Yeah.
It's huge. I bought it secondhand from a buddy. That thing weighs like 83 pounds dry. I mean, it's massive. One of my really good friends who I've been out fishing with a lot this year, he bought the exact same kayak, but the brand new model. So they're the same length. We look like a bunch of idiots with the two kayaks in the bed of his pickup truck going down the road. It's just massive 13-foot kayaks hanging out the top. But
Well, you need a Tennessee trailer,
I
man.
am telling you, man, I'm back on here for a reason, buddy. I'm looking for some sponsorship dollars. Um, but we've taken those out quite a bit, but it's they're real wide, right? Like they're meant to be able to stand and cast from.
Mhm.
And really, like after just a couple times out there, you do feel like it's stable. And to your point with the depth finder, my buddy gave me his depth finder with the kayak too. It was just a heck of a deal. It was very kind of him. And I not so much for structure, I guess, in the areas that I've been fishing. I don't. It's just not that great of a depth finder, if we're just being perfectly honest. But it does give you very accurate water temperature, which is really nice,
Right.
especially this heat. But even more importantly, it gave me accurate depth. And so there's been a couple of lakes that I fished that they're real muddy. They're real dark water lakes. They're not the clean water, right? And
Right.
you wouldn't know it from the bank or from the road when you drive by. Like, man, that looks like a great fallen tree. Like that could be a sweet brush pile for crappie at some point in time. I got out there in the kayak, and it's reading like 8 inches of water. Like, there's no way I'm in 8 inches of water, and you can't see anything. And I
Yeah.
stick my paddle, and sure enough, I could ankle deep right here, man. Like you're in the middle of the lake. So that depth finder, man, that it is definitely an asset if you have one, just to be able to, with not using the naked eye, like you can't see things like that in specific water. So I've
Yeah.
really enjoyed using one of those again. My dad had one when I was a kid. We'd fish out of his John boat, and he had the old school hummingbird. It would like show the blip of the fish, whether it was a tree or a brush pile or a bubble, for all we knew. So this one's a step above that. But it kind of made me think back to those days. Like, if nothing else, it's good to tell you how deep the water is. Maybe not necessarily that there's fish there.
Right. And we're knocking on October. I mean, this is going to be coming out it'll be almost the last week of September when this is going to drop because we record a week ahead of time, guys.
Yeah.
Um, but fall crappie season,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing says fly rod and lake to me other than crappie season,
Yeah.
because you can throw out some really nice hand tied jigs on your fly rod. And man, catching crappie like that, and water temperature is crucial. And there are several different ways to check for water temperature. And I know a lot of guys understand that the first 6 inches of the water is a totally different temperature than the next 2 feet. But sometimes those electronics, which we never talk about on here, honestly, can be, from people that I've talked to, game changers on how we do some of this.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's been fun to get out and kind of have those newer toys to mess with and learning to fish in a different way and yeah, dial it in, right?
Hmm.
That's been a lot of fun. But I have been able to get out and do some trout fishing. You're right, and that's always a good time. You know, I you mentioned the River Road creations, the hopper pattern, and
Hmm.
so I tie flies, right, and put them on my Etsy shop, and I have had more orders for the stealth bomber, the River Road creation stealth bomber pattern. I've had more orders of that than I have anything throughout the course of the entire year, just over the last 6 or 7 weeks. And it's mostly people down south. I've had some orders from Louisiana. I've had some from Texas. I've had, I think, maybe Kentucky and Virginia, just all over the place wanting that stealth bomber pattern, which is kind of surprising. I mean, I know that the time of year and depending upon your target species, it's a phenomenal fly. But I've had a
I
lot of
got
those.
my I got my personal best about a month ago on a stealth bomber out of it's one of his ponds, and it was out of that pond. It was my personal best. I got it on the first cast of a stealth bomber.
What personal
Uh,
best? What kind of?
it was largemouth. It was a
Okay.
largemouth in a smaller pond, but it was a good 3 pounds
Yeah.
on a 4 weight fly rod.
Oh, that's
That was
awesome.
a workout. But the stealth bomber, like you said, it's phenomenal. Plus, they also probably watched the video you kicking my ass and tying it.
If they did their research, they had to go back a ways to find that thing. But I love tying that fly. I mean, I'll tell you, like I love tying flies, obviously. But if you're gonna get an order in, sometimes like, oh man, I don't really want to tie, whatever, a bunch of zebra midges or whatnot. But you get a order of stealth bombers, and you're like, oh, yeah, these are fun. Like, these are a fun
Yeah.
fly, and they're easy. The cutout from River Road Creations makes it easy. So if you tie flies at all, I mean, I so recommend those.
Yeah. Have you done this trick yet where you take the foam cylinders for the poppers that they sell
No,
and you take the small size and you you put that in between the fold so you have a foam eye on each side like mine are in white and they've got that green, the excess from what you can't use for a popper anymore after you cut it out.
yeah,
And I've got a little green, like a booby head
okay,
on the front of
I
it,
have not
because you've
done that.
seen the booby fly.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's like a little booby head, so that the head is floating even more, so when it pops down,
yeah.
it makes a lot more action, and I've really enjoyed adding that to mine.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
It's
No, I haven't done that. I'll have to try that on a couple of them.
Yeah, it's totally not necessary. I mean, it's just I did it for aesthetics,
Right.
and then when I started watching it, it just floats a little bit higher to start off with. I mean, because 'cause you've got just that extra piece of foam in there,
Yeah.
and it pops down a little bit. It may be my imagination, but I like it more.
Sure, it makes more noise. It draws more attention. More
Yep.
fish to catch with it. Right.
Yeah. And you can dress the back end of those up however you want to. That's the amazing thing about them.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've tied some with rubber legs on them. Most of them I don't put the rubber legs on. I don't think it's necessary. I think you're going to get enough action from just the front portion of it. But I've had
Yep.
some people request those be added. But you can use any kind of you can bucktail, obviously.
Mhm.
You could use craft fur if you really wanted to. You get creative with it. It's a very versatile
Schlappen,
pattern.
curved schlappen to look like frog legs. I've
Absolutely.
done that on a couple of them. Like it a lot.
Yeah. No, you bet. You bet. I really enjoy that fly, and apparently other people do too because I've done a ton of them, which is pretty cool.
You know what is so funny? I spent all winter I filled up, um, 3 boxes. There were 88 flies each, I think, from Christmas break until January 15th.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of flies, man.
We had a couple of snow days.
Yeah.
And so it was literally, and the listeners probably don't need to know this, but it was literally me getting up, finishing off whatever beer I had when the liquor store opened, driving my four-wheel drive to the liquor store and buying a bunch of beer and coming back home and just sitting down and tying flies.
Yeah.
Um, in the meantime, we were Nerf gun warring and we were playing card games and stuff with the kids. But when the kids were on their devices, I just sat down at my vise.
Yeah.
Um, and I've tied so many different patterns this last year that I really wondered if I would fish them.
Yeah.
But what I found out, and I mentioned this the other day on the podcast, so I don't want to dwell on it too long, but you weren't here. I wound up using a hopper dropper on my Bajuco Flats one weight
Hmm.
because I couldn't get a trout or no, excuse me, a bass. I couldn't get a smallmouth bass. So I switched to a hopper dropper and like it was like a size 12 Rainbow Warrior, little
Okay.
bitty Rainbow Warrior. And I was hooking up with smallies and panfish every cast, either on the hopper or the smallie was only on the dropper.
On the one weight?
But it's amazing. I think it's really neat when we step, and you know this as well as I do because you preach this too. If you're not catching, don't keep fishing that fly.
Right.
You know, I had a hopper dropper tied up from when I was at Cotter, and I was like, well, hell, nothing else is working, so
Yeah.
I just tied it on.
Yeah.
You know, if I would have had to tie the dropper on and all, I would have forget it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But man, it worked great. And I love trying that, trying some of the different flies that we tie. And that's why I always recommend guide flies because they're quick and easy. And then if you find a guide fly you like, a style you like, you can really get fancy with that later.
Oh, you bet. No, you're absolutely right. For the longest time, trout fishing for me, because I went on a guided trip down in Broken Bow last summer, and they had turned me on to down there. They were fishing with a three fly system.
Did you say Broken Bow in Oklahoma?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I've been there. That's a great place, dude.
Oh, it's awesome. It's
That is
awesome.
neat.
Yeah.
Did you go to the Grateful Head and eat dinner?
Yep. That was amazing.
Oh,
Yeah. This was like
did
right.
you get a cigar?
I did not get a cigar, no, but I
They,
did go to
you know, they've got a humidor in there.
So this was June of 2020. So things were
Oh, so they
still,
may have been,
yeah, things were
yeah,
pretty limited on how much you could get out and go do. But we went down there and I went
okay,
fishing, and they fished their three fly system, and I hadn't done
yeah,
much of that, so I had adapted that, I guess, when I came back to Missouri trout fishing. I typically only do two flies, not necessarily the hopper dropper, but maybe two different styles of nymph patterns or whatnot. But
Mhm.
I did this last time, and I had the gnarliest, hairiest wind knot that you could have ever imagined because I had the indicator and then the two flies, and it was. I looked at it and I thought, man, I could probably get this out, but it's going to take me 45 minutes to an hour. And so I just clipped the line, stuffed it all in my pocket, and I said, I'm doing one fly. I'm not going to sign me complicated. I'm going to put an indicator on one fly because I hadn't caught anything up to that point. And sometimes you do have to go back to the basics, and boom, I was catching trout after trout after trout. I don't know if it's timing, simplicity, the right depth, the right fly, but sometimes you just kind of strip all of it away and start over, and that's the tick.
hmm yeah. And the thing I like, I'm anti bobber,
Okay.
um, so I throw a hopper dropper so that I don't have to use a indicator because it's a, and so what we laugh.
You're an
My
elitist,
friends are like,
John. You're an elitist.
well, it's still an indicator. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? But I'm not using an indicator,
Your
and so
indicator
I have
just
to
happens
laugh.
to look like a bug.
Yeah, I have the world's fanciest indicator.
Yeah, your
It's
indicator has
tied on
fake.
one of those, fish shanks from, or what are they called? Yeah, fish shanks from, FTD. So there's no hook, so I can't get in trouble, but
That's
it's
great.
still a fly,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, that's been a large discussion with my friends lately is the hopper dropper versus the indicator.
Yeah.
My friends are like, "You're doing the exact same thing." And I'm like, "Well, I know that, but I just don't feel as dirty."
I didn't tie my indicator, all right, guys?
Yeah. I tied that. It's not an indicator. But yeah,
There's a
you know,
chance
it's
that I
it's
catch a fish with my indicator, and you all won't. So,
yeah, yeah. You know, talking about simplicity, I remember for Christmas saying I got a sling pack and I think I'd talked a little bit about some of the stuff that I'd put in it. Um, I was really surprised this summer how often I just grabbed my sling pack with my, stonefly net, in it. And I had a couple of fly boxes. I had a good assortment of flies that I'd tied all winter. I had, a box of bass flies, a box of trout flies, a pair of hemostats, a couple of things that I just wanted to have on the river.
yeah.
But I was amazed at how much easier it was. And I'm not one to promote you to go out and buy gear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
but it was just so nice that I could just reach into the back of the SUV and grab out that pack and go and be gone and have, everything I needed for a day. And I notice when I'm on my kayak, I try to bring everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so wade fishing without the kayak this summer was really eye opening to what I need versus what I don't need. Are you finding that you're loading more stuff on your kayak now that you're not wade fishing anymore?
Yeah, I take way too much stuff. So, and I was telling my buddy Jason's the way my kayak is set up. I've got the two rod holders kind of right behind me. Easy access to just grab them and interchange them real quick. And then there's two more towards the front of the boat. The boat, it's huge, and you can't reach them because the angle that you put the rods in, they point forward. You have to stand up or like army crawl to grab one of them. I always find myself putting all four rods in and never using but two of them just because of the access. In fact, we were floating the Niangua. We went down mid August. And right before school started with the kids and whatnot, we snuck away for the weekend. And we were like, we're going to go float the Niangua. We're taking our kayaks. We're going to hit some smallmouth. That was our goal. I
Mhm.
It was dumb because school had not started yet in Missouri. I think this was like the final weekend. It was still party
Yeah.
city. There were so many float trips. We looked like imbeciles in our kayaks. I had all four rods. I had a big old cooler in the back. I had all my tackle. I'm not kidding you. We just said, forget it. We kicked back and we drank beer the whole time and just joined in because there was no way we were getting a line in the water. It was packed.
That happened to me on the Black. I think I went in March. It was a warm March. It was beautiful, fish everywhere. And I went back like the middle of May, and it was warm enough that all the river rats had crawled out. And it was like, well, we're not fishing.
It's exactly what it was.
um,
Yeah, I
and
cannot tell you how many times I was asked, "Did you catch anything?
yeah,
How you guys look like you're prepared." Okay,
yeah,
buddy. We're on like hour 6. I've heard it all. Like, and I'm out of
yeah.
beer. I can't tolerate this anymore.
Yeah, I took, the family to the Jack's Fork, and we floated from Alley Springs down to Eminence,
Okay.
and I have floated that multiple times, and that's just a float for the family. If you're gonna float the Jacks, you do it in the spring, you do it way upriver where nobody's at, because it's a highway, but that's where the rental places are for the kids to and the wife to get their kayaks, and they're not fishing, and they don't wanna sit around while they wait on me to catch a fish, but there were multiple people I saw with rods and reels, and I was like, "Hey, did you guys get a chance to fish?" I never said, "Did you catch anything?" I said, "Did you get a chance to fish?" And they're like, "I don't know why in the hell I brought this." And I'm
Right.
like, "My first time, I brought mine too." And they're like, "Yeah, I'm never doing this float again and bringing a fishing rod." I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's there are things you can enjoy about the outdoors, and taking a camera, especially if you go to the Montauk area and you float from Baptist Hole down to, say, Acres Ferry, a nice little float, but you've got the old hospital there you can take photos of. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can take photos of, but it's not the best place to kayak and fish.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. And, timing in terms of the time of year for me, I mean, August, I still thought maybe the crowd would be gone, but we also went on a weekend. Like I should have just known
Yep.
better. Like you could probably go on like a Tuesday through Thursday, and it's more or less a ghost town because I mean weekends are just packed. But
Yeah.
I was a lesson learned. We had a great time. We just there was no way we were fishing.
Yeah. We went on a Thursday, I think, and it was just packed up, and I was we were taking turns who was running up and down, because I would stay back with the kids and my wife would go up front, and then we'd change and whatnot. And there was a sandbar or gravel bar in the middle, and you couldn't float the high side of it. It was too shallow. And the other side was extremely narrow and extremely fast, and there was a tree laid down.
Yeah.
So I just beached, and the kids came up and beached, and we got out our lunch, and I said, "All right, everybody," I'm like, sit down in the water, enjoy your lunch, and watch what happens. Every canoe and half the kayaks flipped in that hole.
Yeah.
And when it was time to leave, I'm like, okay, somebody go over on the other side because this water is deep enough for the kayak to go through, but it's not deep enough for me to ride the kayak through. So I had my wife down here on one end, and I'm pushing the kayaks, and they just float right around this little riffle of this island, and then we launch right below the other side.
Yeah, that's a veteran move right there, buddy.
Yeah, man, you've got to. There are a lot of times, and this is something that if you're new to kayak fishing on rivers, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's always somebody new that might pick up the podcast. It is a lot better to park and walk and look than it is to risk breaking your fly rod or losing your fly rod. Especially if you've got a TFO and you break it, you pay like $40 and they replace it or fix it or whatever. But man, if you don't have that warranty, you're losing a couple $100 on a fly rod and reel line. You know, that's a bad day.
Yeah.
And so it never hurts to get out and look. And even if the water's shallow, always wear your PFD.
Oh, for
That's the
sure.
other thing that's really important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Especially if you're going to be drinking beer.
Yeah, I totally
Or
agree.
anything else that's alcoholic. You gotta, if you're going to crack one beer on the water,
Yeah.
you need to have that flotation device.
Yeah, because things happen in
Because
a hurry. I mean, you might think you have time to throw it on or whatnot, but you can get into some real quick moving water very fast, or to go from shallow to deep in no time.
yeah, and you get where you hit a riffle and the riffle looks like it's fine, and it takes a slow bend and it slow bends right into a down tree.
Yeah, yeah,
And at that point in time, it's either go off the kayak, lay down on the bottom of the kayak. I've had to do that before, where you're talking about army crawling.
hmm
I'm paddling and I see a tree, and it's like, okay, I can either jump off or I can just lay down.
yeah,
And so you just sort of leap out and do the Superman on the top of your kayak and go right underneath it.
yeah. Oh man, that's good.
Hope nothing gets knocked off.
Yeah, man, I'd pay money to see that happen. That'd be quite an experience to watch.
Yeah, to see my chunky hind end dive down in a kayak is well worth admission fee.
Oh, that's good. Oh,
I did that one time, and I forgot about the GoPro that I had on the mount, and the
oh,
GoPro got whacked really bad,
yeah.
and so I had to get out and wade back up and find it. But yeah, it's there's so many things, and kayaks are so popular now.
Mhm.
I remember, I don't, what was it, 7 years ago, 8 years ago when I started kayak fishing. You never saw anybody. There were stretches of river, there was nobody. You've got a 7 mile stretch of river, and you might see some people that own property fishing from the bank. And now, even these really remote rivers that I go to that aren't on the main schedule of people, it's asshole to elbow, and they've all got a kayak, and it's usually one of the cheaper kayaks, and they don't handle so well, and you're watching people fall in the water. You're like, my first kayak was a cheap one, and I swam a lot.
Yeah,
I also learned to tie everything to my kayak. All my rods are tied down, all my paddles, anything that goes on the kayak is tied down.
yeah. No, I completely agree with that. You have to, otherwise
Yeah.
you're just asking for it, really.
Yeah. And it just, I mean, and I hate to say it because it's good for the community, but it's sort of one of those things where it's like, yeah, why don't you all go float the current?
Right.
The current river is where you all need to go. Leave me the Jack's
That's right.
Fork, leave me the Niangua, leave me the Huzzah, leave all these rivers to me, and all you guys just go and have fun on the current river.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh man. So
But
what are,
with your first year, did you notice running into more people since you had the kayak than you did when you were wade fishing?
well, yeah, yeah. You cover more ground too, right? But most of my kayak fishing has been on the lakes and ponds. So yeah, I haven't done a whole lot of river fishing with it. But yeah, it's interesting to see how many, in a way, because I bought that thing secondhanded, it didn't give me away at first glance of being like a brand new shiny kayak, right? Like there's a newbie, you can spot
Right.
them a mile away. So that was
Yeah.
kind of nice. Like I felt like I had camo on to some degree
Yeah.
when I'm floating down the river. But you're right. I mean, they're everywhere. It's just a thing. Even driving down the highway on the weekends, you'll see. I mean, there's just kayaks on top of cars, on top of pickup trucks, being pulled on trailers. All of a sudden, I'm thinking, my God, am I just aware of it because I have one and use one, or is this like this is a thing now, right? Like they're everywhere.
Yeah, the number of J racks on vehicles that I see is incredible.
Yeah,
And we were out, this was last year. We went out to the lodge. A buddy of mine wanted to go out to the lodge on Saturday afternoon, I think. It was, getting closer to evening. The bite was getting ready to come on. And we get out to the lodge, and I think there was two John boats, which is about normal. You never really have more than two John boats on the lake. But there were four kayakers and two paddle boarders on top of us.
yeah, yeah,
And they weren't fishing, but they were just out there. And it's like, when did this happen? I've never seen, I've seen one other guy who kayaks out at the lodge and he fishes.
yeah.
And I'm like, man, all of a sudden now there's six people out here on, personal watercraft and two boats.
Right.
That's a 60-acre lake, but that's still a lot of people
Sure.
all using the same dock. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. What I've found, so I put in the lake close to me. It's like a 5 minute drive from my house, and it's Lake Olathe is what it is. They have a boat ramp because you can have full size boats on there, but you have to go by trolling motor. So a
Yeah.
lot of kayaks and a lot of John boats and whatnot. So I've only put in once at the actual boat ramp because it's not very big and it tends to get really busy. But what I found on the other side of the lake, there's a like a big grassy field that goes right up to the
Hmm.
water, and they maintain it very well. And so I can pull my car down with my trailer right next to the water, unload my kayak into that grass, and just slide my kayak in right there. That's the better end of the lake for fishing anyway, as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot more structure and it's easier to get around. And then I just pull my car forward and leave it parked right there by the side of the road. So I don't use the boat ramp like everybody else does because it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's too complicated and it's too busy. So I found an alternative. And not even my buddy showed it to me. I can't even take claim to it. So it's the way to do it. You got to find alternative ways.
Yeah.
It's the beauty of a kayak too, right? Like you can get in the water nearly everywhere with it.
Yeah. Well, when Nick used to live here in town and then he moved to Louisiana and they moved up to St. Louis. When he won, was it earlier this summer down at Beaver Lake, the Hobie Bass tournament?
Yeah,
Everybody was putting in at the boat ramp.
that's right.
And he found a place and it was like a mile away from the boat ramp. And he slid his right in from the water and he was fishing it. And he said this guy, he just heard this hellacious commotion. This guy had put it at the boat ramp and had been paddling for 40 minutes to get to this spot. And Nick had already got every fish that was going to bite because he'd been fishing it for an hour,
Yeah,
you know. And sometimes we get, and the rules for that tournament say that you can do that. I mean, it's not like he did anything. There were other guys doing it on other parts as well, but sometimes we get into this mindset that, oh, I've got a trailer, so I've got to put in here. Well, I take my Tennessee trailer down here to Duck Creek Wildlife, and I just pull off on the side of the road and drop my kayak in, and I jump in and go. The road's wide enough. There's cars parked along there. I'm not worried about it. I don't need to go up to the boat dock and put in and then paddle, all the way across the lake. I can put in where I need to.
yeah,
Or what's even better is if you can put in and tie off your kayak and you've got a friend. And man, you drop one vehicle the way the wind's blowing, and then you just fish that lake like you would a river with the wind blowing, man.
that's a good
You know,
idea right there, man. Yeah,
you know, and you can get the kayak out.
yeah,
You don't have to have the boat
yeah,
ramp. So, you can just go wherever the wind's blowing and you don't have to paddle as much. And I think sometimes we get so excited about etiquette that we forget that the whole point of having a kayak is being able to get at places you can't take a boat.
exactly.
Sort of like what Eric Jackson said about his kayak being 45 pounds.
Yeah,
You can walk at places you can't take a regular kayak.
yeah. And there's truth to that, right? Like mine's 83 pounds, and that sucker is heavy. I can't get without putting that on like a kayak dolly. I have to strap it on that and then push and pull it, and even that's a pain. Like it's
Oh
too
yeah.
big. It really is. Like I need a smaller kayak is what I need. But I really enjoy once I'm on the water. I love all the space, the real estate that I have with it, but it's not very maneuverable. So if you had something that's half the weight of what mine is, yeah, you could throw that over your shoulders and go anywhere you want.
Well, call Eric. You've got his phone number. Get him to loan you an Apex for a couple of years for sponsorship for the show.
That's a good idea. I'll throw
Yeah.
my weight around with my the recognition of my name. Surely he's heard of me
Yeah.
by now.
Hey, Eric, you remember being on the podcast with me and Sean? I think we need a couple of those Apex kayaks.
I'll be sure to drop the name of your company again because I know you need the promotion.
Yeah, Apex kayaks are doing, they're horrible. Nobody's ever wanting one of those. Nobody's heard of them before with your designer leather seat. Oh my Lord. God, they're beautiful though.
They are awesome kayaks. That's so true.
Man.
Yeah.
You know how like guys sit around, they look like 69 Camaros and they drool. I'm just sitting here with opening up the center fold of the Apex kayak.
There's a guy on the lake that I fish. I've seen him a couple times now. He's got a Hobie and it's got the pedals and everything. And
Yeah, the
oh
360
my god,
Mirage Drive,
he just looks
$4,000
good.
Cadillac.
Oh, he's everywhere on that lake, and I'm like, just trying to get to the one honey hole that I know about. He has been everywhere by the time I even hit the water.
I've never seen a speed test, but I would put the Jackson Bite FD up against a Hobie for speed.
Would you? I haven't seen a bite in action.
Oh, a friend of mine's got one.
Really?
Yeah, and when we were out at the lake, we were out at the Elks Lake Father's Day, and he threw a wake, and I was sitting there going, "What in the hell's going on?" Rocking around because he decided it was time to go, and he came across the lake, and literally there was a wake like somebody was using a outboard, and he's a big old boy
That's
too,
too funny.
and he was just like, "Wow."
That's great.
Yeah, and they're neat too because a lot of your drives like that, and I know Hobie's got theirs where if you hit something, they knock up now. The Wildy drive and the Perception drive don't do that. And I know some of them, I think, what is it, the Native that takes the Hobie drive? But anyway, the Bite has its own setup. So no matter what position the prop is in, it'll kick up if you hit anything. And if you're in grass, you can kick it up to where you'll only be half the prop in the water, or you can pull it all the way up to clean it off.
Okay,
I love it.
that's cool.
I wish they would have made the Bite 5 years ago when I bought my radar. I wish that would have been an option because man, now it's like $1,000.
Yeah.
I guess the Bite FD is like 2,500 um with the pedal drive, and the Wildy is probably, if you get everything right, you can get it for like $2,000 with the pedal drive.
Yeah.
But those pedal drives are apples and oranges.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Um, well, I wonder too, like, so do you know much about lightning kayaks? Have you done any research on those?
I have not. We ought to reach out to somebody, get them on the show.
Yeah, so Robert Field, he's the big guy on YouTube. He's got a big stake in that company. He's a big time kayak fisherman. And
He was a big Wildy guy for a long time. I haven't watched his show in a while, but he was a big Wildy
okay,
guy.
well, they launched Lightning Kayaks. He's a majority owner or large owner in that company. They launched that maybe not even 2 years ago, I'm going to say. And their big thing was they wanted affordability, they wanted pedal
Mhm.
drive, and then, of course, to be lightweight and easy to take around and whatnot. But he does a ton of fishing in the ocean, too. And he uses it both
Yeah.
for freshwater and ocean. And I've seen several of his YouTube stuff, obviously, and he's in that lightning kayak everywhere. And it looks super stable. It's not super flashy necessarily, but it looks durable. And I think you can get the whole thing. I want to say like 16 or 1800 bucks, and they look pretty
Yeah.
sweet. So I'd like to do some more research into those because they're supposed to be competitive with the big time names, but try not to pay so much in terms of sticker price.
Speaking of kayaks, Drew Gregory, I watched all of iCast. I never saw Drew's new Crescent fishing kayak that he announced on our show. When was that he announced that? That was back in the spring, wasn't it?
Probably 3 months ago, probably. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Maybe
And I
early
looked
summer.
all over the videos on iCast and I couldn't find it.
So they never launched it.
But you know, those Crescent kayaks, I joined their I even joined their Facebook group, the official owners Facebook group, to see if anybody was going to talk about it.
Yeah,
Man, their following is compared to like the Wildy Radar group, they have action constantly in that Crescent kayak group. If you're looking for a kayak and you don't know what to get, I strongly encourage you to get on social media and join the official owners groups for all of these. You can get so much information. You know, it's information overload sometimes.
yeah. That's cool. That's the beauty of social media, right? There's a lot of negative that comes with it, but you can really use it just to dig in and get legitimate information for things like this because you're talking directly to the source. Whether that's manufacturing, those that have a bid in the making, that's where the money is. They're going to definitely give you the best and top of the line information because that's what they want to have reputable. They want their company name to be reputable. So that's
Yeah.
cool to hear that you follow that. And there's a lot of information from them.
Yeah, well, I was waiting for Drew to come out with and I know he's fishing the Tournament of Champions with Nick. I'm not sure if Christine Fisher is yet or not. I don't know if she's had a top 3 finish, but I'm hoping that we can have after that tournament we can have an episode with Nick and an episode with Drew, and if Christine is there, have an episode with her to get 3 different perspectives on how that works out.
Yeah,
But also the idea of I like Drew talk when he was on talking about the Crescent kayaks because we really haven't had a lot of kayak manufacturers other than I guess it's just Drew and Eric Jackson are the only 2 we've really had. Um, we've never had a fly vise manufacturer on,
yeah.
which I told you about calling Bernie, didn't I?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I called Bernie. And I got a hold of his daughter and I was talking to her and I'm like, look, Rick from Oasis, Tony Thompson from River Road, the mad scientist from Fly Tires Dungeon. I'm like, all these guys. And he's like, nope, don't want to do it. Don't know anything about it. Don't want to do it. And I'm like, dude, I've got one of your vices sitting right here, and he's like, nope, don't want to do it. And I'm sitting there going, man, if I ever thought that I could get somebody on the show
Yeah.
just because we know all the same people and,
You would think a lot of those
granted they don't,
connections carry so much weight, right?
yeah. And I mean, it's funny because I've talked to some of the guys that have been on the show and they're like, well, I don't see a bump with a promo code, but I see a huge bump in orders after your show's aired. And so I know a lot of people don't like to use promo codes. They just decide they want to pay full price, but the promo code really helps because that shows how much our audience uses. So if you're listening to the show, use that kayak code at Cutthroat Leaders. That means a lot.
Yeah.
Use it at Dooley's Fly Fishing. If you're going to email any of our sponsors, mention the program in there because that helps us to manage how we reach people, how we contact people.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a regular commercial for a TV show, but we can't tell exactly who's watching TV. Unlike if you're watching, Netflix, they know who you are, your email, the last thing you talked about in your living room with your wife,
Right.
they know all that. We don't.
That's the only measurable way we have to know
Yeah.
how effective we are with our audience is them using
Yeah.
the promo. Yeah.
Yeah. We know how many downloads there were. And other than that, it's pretty much it. We don't even know how long you listened. We just know you downloaded it. And hey, honestly, just share it with your friends, get them to download it. We need to bump some of those numbers up. We've hit a plateau. We need to move up, but enough about the business there. But, I forgot what I was going to say. What we're talking about. The Vice.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, I really thought that he would be because it's all of his buddies,
Yeah.
Cause we've sort of, and I hate to say it like this, we run in a circle.
Yeah.
Of
very
Western Fly Tires.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
And how we got in this circle of Western Fly Tires, I'll never know.
Yeah.
But I know Rick gives us a lot of names and he talks to a lot of guys. McFly, you've seen McFly on YouTube.
Yep.
He just can't make it work, but he's like, yeah, I would love to be on there if I could make it work. We have a core group of the fly tying industry, say over here, that we've really worked with and really developed a lot of great relationships. And I'd like to see some other stuff. So if you have a guest or you know somebody and you're a listener and you think they would be a good guest, let us know, because we're always looking to expand that. Like I said, for being Midwestern guys, we have more Western fly fishermen than we know what to do with.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true. Not a bad thing, right? Not a bad thing.
No. There's nothing wrong. I mean, I love listening to the guys talk about fly fishing in the Bitterroot Mountains. Speaking of, Mike from Cutthroat is coming on in the next couple of weeks, and he's going on a big fishing trip this weekend, and he wants to talk about that.
Sweet. That's awesome.
So,
Yeah.
again, we'll be talking about fly fishing out in the West. But I mean, how many of us get a chance to go out there? I know I haven't gotten a chance to go out there. You did. You went to Colorado, didn't you?
Colorado, yeah. That's the extent of it, though. And I haven't been out in a couple of years now. Yeah, it's been a couple of summers since I've had a chance to go out. We were going out there once a year for a few years, but then not been the case here recently, unfortunately.
Well, you've got to get that Patreon page set up so that you can do the running. What was the running and fishing that you wanted to do?
Oh, oh shoot.
And you would have known it if I hadn't brought it up.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I want to say Brooder Brew, but that's a different thing here in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So let me think. I can tell you here in just a minute. It'll come to me.
Yeah, but that was a neat one, because you run and you have to catch a fish, and you get more points if it's a native fish.
Yes.
And you have to decide how long you're going to spend fishing.
Versus, yep, that's exactly.
Or if you're just going to sit at the halfway mark and drink bourbon.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Which, if it wasn't at the halfway mark, if they just had the bourbon at like the first fishing hole, I'd be fine.
Yeah.
But the fact you've got to go halfway and then come back. Like, I would buy one of those little beeper things you do for an emergency to get helicopter pickup. Be like, I'm entirely too drunk to walk back. Blip,
Well, they have people. I cannot believe I can't think of that name. I'm even trying to look it up right now, and I can't find it. They'll have people that they do not run. Like, they're the fuck out. Like, I'm not a runner, so they just walk the stream to catch the fish and eventually find their way to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to get that Patreon set up so we can get trips like that, so we can be more informed for our guests. And we will send everybody, if we set this Patreon up, we will send everybody a picture of us fishing and drinking beer for free. We will send them those photos digitally. We're not going to pay to get them printed out or postage.
Yeah.
But,
that's funny.
I tell you what, guys, we're getting ready to wrap up. Adam, I've got a cutthroat leader for anybody. What do you want the criteria to be this week? If anybody wants to try and win.
How about let's push to social media? Can you comment on the Kayak Flyer Facebook page and tag a buddy, and that'll get you qualified to win it?
Yeah, the Facebook page. Yeah, even the Instagram page. We'll put up, I'll make a graphic for a winning thing, and you can do that. And what the hell, if somebody comments with Kayak Flyer on the Trail Fly fishing page, we'll give them one too.
Yeah, you bet.
We'll do a drawing if they go over to your Instagram. How's that?
Perfect.
So we'll give away 2 leaders this week if people want them.
I love that. That's great. Cool.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
In celebration of Mike re-upping his, Mike and Ethan re-upped their sponsorship of the show. So we are in it to win it for another year, or we have to give back the money that almost pays for the show. I since we got the new software, because we were, Gink and Gasoline was on here, and then Lewis and them were going to do the show. Well, we did a show, and they didn't like it. They were stepping on each other, and one thing led to another, and I haven't heard from them. And so I paid for this new software.
Yeah.
So like our cost for the podcast doubled, and I'm sitting there going, now do I get rid of this new software and so we can like be breaking even, or do I keep it because I like this software?
Yeah.
But man, that's a dilemma.
You got to have somebody else that you need to partner with outside of them if they're not going to use that software system.
Well, I've got the Bigfoot podcast, and I was nice to them. Understanding Bigfoot, I run theirs. It's not a podcast; it's a YouTube show. the guy that runs that is an English teacher, so I'm nice to him, and he'll pay me when he gets a sponsor. And then Stonefly and Cutthroat are going to help sponsor for the first 6 months of Drinking on the Fly,
Awesome.
and then after that, we're going to look. And so, what I thought we would do is like if we get a Kansas City beer, you could hook us up with the beer, and then we could sit there and drink beer while you tied flies.
It's win-win.
Yeah. So we'll be reaching out to some different folks and see there. But yeah, it's and Nick Dooley's going to help with that quite a bit. So Dooley's Fly Fishing, say 15% promo code kayak. He's going to help quite a bit with that too. But yeah, it's every time I get ready to think, okay, maybe the podcast has run its course. Maybe we've locked into these types of guests that we really enjoy and we really like, and they're really great people. But the third time you have Ben Tutt on, it's always going to be a good time, but there's not, it's not always as fresh or new, or you're not learning about, a different fly tire or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we have the show and we really enjoy the show and the show gets really good ratings. And sometimes I feel like, man, I just don't know if we want to keep doing this. And then every time I say that, we wind up having a really great guest that pops in, like Gretchen and Al or Jack Dennis. And, we have such a good setup. It's hard to say no to it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I understand. There's been so many great connections through the podcast, just in and of itself. I learned a lot of things along the way. I'll tell you that firsthand. And things like River Road Creations and tying with those particular patterns, I would have never come across that had I not been a part of the podcast. That's just one example. There's been several.
And Tony's still running behind on orders from COVID.
Good. That's great.
I mean, his orders were up over 200% last year.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, it's wild how many new fly tires there are. So if even if you don't know if somebody fly fishes or fly ties and you listen to this show, mention it, because I found out the other day, one of my students, his grandfather ties flies. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, he goes, I told him to listen to your podcast. I'm like, well, hey, that's cool,
Yeah.
And so he'll listen to some of the ones with some of the other fly tires that he knows, because he's an older guy and he's like, I grew up buying this book. So, mention it and share it so that we can make sure that we can keep the great content headed your way. And I think we have some of the best guests in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. We've had it's been a really eclectic mix over the last couple of years too, which I really like. You're not going to get the same thing over and over or hear the same message just from a different voice. You're going to get a completely different perspective or learn about something you didn't even know exists. It's flyathlon. That's what it is. So
flyathlon,
knowing like something like that exists and it's huge within its own region, but you'll never know about it unless you're from the area or you hear from somebody or like the podcast. If you listen to our podcast, you learn about it. Otherwise, you'll never know something like that exists.
Yeah, and we had the pick one up hippie.
Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. True. And I remember I've been telling my friends, I'm like, hey, go ahead and pick up one piece of trash while you're out.
Yeah.
And, like he said, you wind up, so everybody now brings a bag with them on their kayak.
Yeah.
And they pick up, a couple of beer cans here and there and this and that people have spilled in the water. And it's like, you're not making a huge difference, but hell, you're trying and you're making some difference.
Yeah. When you collectively string that together, you get enough people doing a little bit, then that can add up.
Yeah. And, just the way that guy, and I can't remember his name, but the pick one up guy, just the way he was so passionate about picking stuff up. I mean, that's, those are the things that I like about the podcast. You're going to listen to some, hippie from California talking about, collecting aluminum cans. And then the next week you're going to hear, a world famous fly tire and author like, Tim Camisa, who's going to be on in November.
Yep.
So,
Pretty cool. Yeah. Pretty cool.
All right, buddy. Our pumpkin, our coach is about to turn into a pumpkin. So I'm going to say thank you. And hopefully we'll have, I've got a couple of feelers out for next week. I think I've got a line on a couple of really good folks. But next week we'll be back. We'll have a really good show for you. And we really appreciate you guys listening. Like I said, head over to social media when this drops and comment. And we'll set up a couple of places where you can comment and follow and share. And try to win yourself a Cutthroat World Leader. And also any one of Adam's posts that are out there after this drops, just hashtag Cutthroat Leaders on it. and we'll pull your name or pull a name from those for the leader.
Cool.
Cool.
Love it.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you next week. Well, that didn't work. I just played the music in it. Oh, there we go. There's the outro music. We're professionals.
We know what we're doing.
Yeah. We've done this. How long?
Oh, man, that's good.